Sexual betrayal has entered your relationship and you're devastated, but you want to stay and get back to the relationship you thought you had. How do you restore intimacy when it has been shattered? Today on Hope and Healing Chats, I'm joined by Matthew and Joanna Raabsmith and Dan Drake to discuss the intimacy pyramid. It's a tool that couples can use to find their way to true intimacy. I'm your host, Monifa Ellis-Addie, and make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Hi, Joanna, Matthew, and Dan. We have 3 guests today. How are you all doing today?
Great, glad to be here.
Great, it's good to join you.
Thank you for coming today. And before diving into this topic of the intimacy pyramid, I thought it'd be, first we have to talk about what are we talking about with intimacy? Because usually this is not the sex pyramid. I don't think so. So what are we talking about when we say the intimacy pyramid? Like, what is intimacy?
I was just thinking we could have sold so many more books if we called it the sex pyramid. Dan, what were we thinking?
That
was a big miss.
Big miss.
That's for you, Matthew. You're going to take that
It's
one.
for me.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I will. When we are talking about intimacy, it is physical, but it's also spiritual. It's emotional. It's relational. It's really about a holistic connection with someone that is life-giving. I think ultimately when we think about intimacy, we think about the life that it gives to each individual person and to others around the relationship. We've been around, many of us have been around relationships that we just feel the energy and experience some of that joy. So I think that's one of the big things is that sense of holisticness that gives energy, that gives life.
I think it's a good point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just that like deep connection, right? Like deep connection, attachment, and that idea of being fully known, which would be, right, like physically embodied, physically known, emotionally, kind of that depth of understanding experienced in a relationship.
Well, I was just going to say how, you brought that up, Monifa, how like confused this term is. Intimacy is such a like common term. Everybody's heard that word, but what actually does it mean? I think I love those definitions. To me, it's embodied. It's emotional connection. It's spiritual connection. It's physical, non-sexual connection. It's sexual connection. There's so many different levels to it and layers to it.
What I love about it is this pyramid, because even in the descriptions, right, it's holistic. It's all these things to the point when you hear it, it kind of feels overwhelming. Like, how do you do that on a practical level? Which is where the intimacy pyramid comes on in. Like, this is how you do this on a practical level. And I love using it with clients because it helps to mitigate expectations. We're going to this big holistic idea, but this is how we do these steps. One of you, because we have all 3 of you, one of you, just quickly give us a rundown of the steps. What are these, or stages, I should say, not steps. What are these stages to intimacy?
We call them stages. We call them levels.
Levels. Stages.
We had this conversation, just so you know, Monifa, we had this conversation like a million times. What are we actually calling each of these? The levels of the pyramid, I think is what we actually called it.
Yeah.
I'll just say, so there's 5 levels to it. So at the top and at the pinnacle of the pyramid is intimacy, because that's what we're all shooting for in a relationship. When we get into a relationship, most of us, that's what we're actually looking for is true, full connection with another human being, to be fully seen, fully known. So that's at the apex of it. Underneath that is vulnerability. You can't have intimacy without vulnerability. To be seen and fully, to be known and know, you have to be vulnerable. But underneath all that is, honestly, this is something that when we were kind of developing this, I took a lot of this stuff for granted. Underneath vulnerability and intimacy, what's underneath all that to actually make vulnerability safe enough to share yourself, to be fully known by somebody and to know somebody. Underneath vulnerability is trust, and underneath that is safety. And at the core of it is something probably most of us take for granted, is honesty. That you have to be fully honest and authentic about who you are to build safety, trust, vulnerability, and ultimately intimacy.
How did you guys break this down into these 5 levels?
How
did you know these are the ones that is going to get us to...
Joanna, do you want to start?
Yeah, it was a lot born out of, I think, just the work with couples who were trying to build intimacy from just the most devastation you could imagine in a relationship, right? Coming in bleeding because, right, one of the things we knew is that honesty and safety was not there anymore, right? Mm-hmm. In the wake of betrayal, it's pretty clear that those are 2 pieces that have been taken away from the relationship. And now this couple is bleeding out. And so we knew, okay, well, that needs to be restored, those things. And But most couples, right, they don't want just honesty and safety back and now we're good. They want something so much more. They really want to thrive. And so I think both professionally, also in our own relationship, it's part of Matthew and I's journey, part of our story. And so for us, it's also a personally lived experience of going, we want thriving intimacy. Is that possible? And if so, how do we get there? And so there is some different variations of the intimacy pyramid at first. And we moved some levels as we worked with couples, talked to couples, thought about our own journey, our own story. Started developing components in each level, like what actually makes up honesty, what makes up safety, right? And it started to really flow. It started to make sense, both in terms of the couples we were working with. As we started sharing it with more and more couples, they were looking at it going, yes, this makes sense. Finally, I feel like there's a real road that's possible for us to travel to get to intimacy. And so I think just the hope, the excitement, the courage that it grew in the couples we were working with, and that willingness to walk down the path, live it out, and see, yes, this works, was a big part of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say this. It started, I was actually working on a different project, and I kind of sketched the idea of this, the pyramid. It was a little different at that time, but I was working on something else, which if actually was published in the disclosure workbooks that Janice Caudill and I did first. And you'll see it, I think it's where it gets a little confusing because it's a little bit different version of this. Actually, it's quite different in terms of the levels are very similar, but at the bottom in the previous version was trust. And that's how I originally sketched it. And Joanna, you guys, I thought of it in terms of rebuilding after disclosure was the initial concept for this. But when you guys started working with couples and they just found like this was actually something that was pretty universal for, couples healing from betrayal, but also I think the thing I hadn't even thought about, which we're like, well, actually couples, it's not just couples healing back from betrayal where this applies. It's actually, any of us that are trying to build intimacy in our relationships could really benefit from using this, this model. So I've seen it play out. I've actually, even in the process of writing a book, like I've been rethinking some of these things. How do I apply these concepts better in my own relationship? It's not just trying to teach this stuff, it's trying to live it out. And I'm like, okay, that says there's something here that I think is universal that applies to all of us.
And I think it's also important. I like that you said that, Dan, that this is not just for, intimate betrayal. Like, yes, it's great because it's so shattering. You need some sort of a blueprint, but it's like you can actually use this in other relationship, like just a relationship period, because these aren't things that are taught to us as kids. Like, we don't grow up trying to build intimacy. That's more of the sex pyramid when we're older, not the intimacy one. So I love the fact that it's a blueprint for any couple just wanting to build intimacy. Now, I'm curious if you have different opinions on this. Is there a level that you feel is more important or more vital or like the most necessary in reaching intimacy?
Oof. I don't think you could do without any. I think our experience has been the surprise at how little honesty there exists between couples of all kinds. And I think that honesty is something that we struggle in. We all know it as a relational concept. I think we all get it as going, okay, yeah, if I lie, if I hide, it's hard. But I think what we were finding is even in cases where we dealt with this kind of big hidden lie, the practice of being honest about myself means I have to be aware. I have to know myself. I have to sense myself. I have to be in touch with myself. And that's hard for a lot of people. Many of us have spent decades trying to not be in touch with ourselves, not to feel anything. And so I think what we found is even for couples who had been doing recovery work for 2 or 3 years, they were coming in and still struggling just to have base level honesty with each other beyond just the facts. And so I don't know that it's more important, but I think what we've started to see is when those bottom foundational pieces weren't in place, everything else was struggling, right? We'd have like a betrayed spouse who'd go, I don't know why, I just don't still trust him. He's had a polygraph every 6 months. And I know he's not in his addiction and he's in recovery, but something tells me it's not all there. And that was usually would come down to this like lack of honesty, this lack of awareness. And so they couldn't really show up fully honest. And so I think that to me, that's one of the reasons that level is so important because it starts to affect everything else in the relationship. So
yeah, my answer is going to be similar, but just a little different. I was going to say the safety level. And partly because I think that's most misunderstood level maybe of the pyramid, or right, I think couples totally understand, like, yeah, there needs to be trust and vulnerability if you're going to have intimacy. That makes sense, even honesty to a certain degree. But it's amazing how many couples look at me surprised when, after they've like shared where they feel like they're getting stuck in a relationship, I go, oh, it sounds like you don't have any safety. They're like, what? No, we're safe. I'm safe. What are you talking about? And they don't really understand emotional safety and what that means and looks like and how to build it. And so I think I'm kind of educating, helping them understand what that is, how to build it. I've definitely found a lot of my work with couples being in that space. And couples oftentimes will try to jump over that level to push into trust and vulnerability, the things that are way more fun, before securing that safety enough where they're really going to succeed as they move up the pyramid.
I don't know that I have a different answer. I think that's good. I was going to say, I was looking through each of them, I think, but at least after a betrayal, when I hear from, especially from betrayed partners, for honesty, when honesty crumbles, when there's deception and lies, I mean, more often than not, when I see relationships that make it or don't, it's not because of the truth that's shared typically, unless, sometimes the truth is just that devastating for the partner of the relationship. Usually it's the deception. It's ongoing lies and deception that ultimately kills the relationship. So you can't build anything from there. And I just think it sounds so simple. I'll just be honest. But when I see relationships that don't make it, it's usually for that reason. And I think Matthew had a good point. We weren't talking just relational honesty, although that's obviously critical. We're talking about self honesty. So it's being able to be self-aware. It's really working on myself. And what am I in denial of about myself, and how do I continue to grow and continue to learn so that I can express myself more fully? Because without that, we don't have much either. So I guess I just have to say, go back to honesty, how critical it is.
Tiebreaker.
We win.
Now, are these levels linear? Is there any, or do we go back and forth? Do we get to a point of where it's like safety, feeling vulnerable, but then somehow we dip down back into honesty? Like, what does this look like?
Yes.
It's
it's all that.
Yeah. I tried to explain to someone, it's like a linear circle, right? Or grid. It's a little of both. I think, like Dan was saying, you start to try, and Joanna as well, like you skip bottom levels or you leave something really undealt with, it's going to show up as you move up, right? As you start to move along in the relationship and you try to be vulnerable, you're going to try it and go, wait, something's not working. So it is linear in that way. Like you can't be practicing intimacy, or people at least try to, and that's when they watch the relationship crumble. It is also the case that it's not once we've established honesty, we're done. We've got that honesty tattoo, right? And we're good and we never go back to it. What we've been really excited about is when we work with couples and we take them on this journey, we'll see them get to intimacy and they'll look back at their relationship and go, we can be more honest, or I think we can work better as a team together, or I think we haven't truly uncovered all of our grief. I think we should go back. And so what's kind of cool is as you work the pyramid, you also get excited or see opportunities to go back to the other places and say, I really want to dive in, partly because of the security of our connection. And that's what's been really fun, is seeing secure couples approach it differently than those couples that are like, we don't know where we are yet. When they're in that secure place, the work just feels totally
different. The reality is you're working with a relationship, which is not linear. It's not clear steps that everyone's always going to follow, right? It's messy. Relationships blur the lines. And so while you may be really focused on building honesty, there may be still ways that you guys are the couple's vulnerable together, that right, if you are still sharing finances and co-parenting, there's a level of vulnerability there where you're interdependent with each other. And so it's not that we get to strip away all vulnerability or intimacy or trust as you're doing the work, but understanding that there may need to be some boundaries put around vulnerability on intimacy to create a safe structure to heal in and rebuild the safety and the trust before you really start pushing in there. But it definitely is much, much messier than the pretty visual of the pyramid.
And I think every couple is going to struggle in different areas too, whether that's stuff that just is unique to every individual couple. So I think that's what I found is how do we apply this in a way that works for each? We think these different levels all apply and the different components within each level, but they're all going to, couples are going to do much better with some of the pieces and struggle with others. So how do we, build on them and then stretch the areas that they have need strength in?
But with that being said, some couples struggle on some levels and are better than others. Or like Joanna said, it's messy because it's relational. But is it possible for one person, an individual, to be on one level and another individual to be on a different level? Or do we have to, or does it make it not work if we're on, like, what does that
Yeah,
look like? Because it is
it's
messy.
a little tricky. Yeah. And even in the book, we talk a little bit about this, where especially the bottom two levels, there's a very large individual component, right? Each individual is either showing up honest, safe, or not honest, not safe, right? So certainly there could be a partner who's showing up, and this happens a lot in betrayal couples, where one partner has been showing up honest and safe for the other one, and the other partner has not. Then you have to also consider the relationship, right? So maybe it's the relationship isn't honest and safe if both individuals are not showing up to that relationship honest and safe. And then as you move into those upper levels, it's definitely more you're looking at the relationship as a whole. But it still includes two individuals, right? And so again, with vulnerability, if one person is being open and being vulnerable and the other one isn't, you kind of are going to get stuck in that level until both partners can show up fully vulnerable with each other.
Dad?
That was a pretty good answer.
He had something to say.
That I did?
Both of you did like a little head nod thing, and I was like, is something coming? Okay.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wasn't going to say anything different. I was just going to add that, yeah, I mean, I think I have seen that play out, but the problem is it's let's say the partner's more wanting to show up more vulnerably, but the betrayer in this situation, it has not shown themselves safe or trustworthy yet. It's going to be imbalanced, and you're going to end up with, you might see that play out, but it's going to end up with problems, or it's going to end up with, the partner may show up and not feel safe, and then we're going to end up with some volatility potentially. Or so I just think it's kind of destabilized until we have both people really willing to commit to kind of being in the same place at the same time. And that's hopefully how we can start. Like Joanna said, there's individual components to all of it. But if the relationship, is two individuals aren't committed as a relationship team to building this together, it's not going to work towards building this ultimately. Of course, towards getting intimacy as a couple, it won't work. It'll just be destabilized.
I presented on this at one of the Helping Couple Heals support groups. And at the end of it, I hope this wasn't like blasphemous to the book, but what I did was I had people create their own intimacy period, since it's couples, creating their own, like, what is it that they need for intimacy? So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Like having people do, like, this is what I need for intimacy. And then I had each individual do it, and then they kind of joined theirs together to create like a couples intimacy pyramid. Was that okay?
Cool.
Yeah, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. No, I mean, I think that's what was difficult about the book a little bit, because we wanted to capture what we felt like, generally speaking, right, every secure relationship was going to have. But we also understood each individual story is different. That's why no two couples we see are exactly the same. And so based on their narratives and experiences, it can be different about how they flesh out even these particular components. Mm-hmm. Honesty between a couple where there's been betrayal looks very different than honesty for a couple where there's not been betrayal. Yeah. There's a different flow to it. There's a different meaning to it, but we just know that that's kind of there. Those pieces are there. We talked about, like, there would probably be 30 levels if we wanted to make them, in terms of all the different pieces that you could put into an ingredient that makes a great relationship. We felt like wanting to get people to see, I think, that this idea that you're not going to get to intimacy unless you're working on something. And we know that if you're working on these 5 things, right? Honesty, safety, trust, vulnerability, and intimacy, you are going to see vast improvements in your relationship. And I think that's what we've really taken from the work, is that what this has allowed couples to do is to get really clear on, this is a practical step I can take to actually get into a better relational experience. Versus, I think so many of us, we got married or we got into significant relationships, and it was like, other than reading a blog or two, I'm not quite sure what we're going to do to make great improvements, right? People felt really, really stuck. And so we wanted to create a resource that someone could pick up and go, yeah, I can do that, right? I can do this thing and see some growth in my relationship.
And one of the things we talk about is there's more structure early on for a couple and more as that safety and trust is being built. And then when they are getting more to vulnerability in that intimacy phase, there's actually less structure. You never totally get rid of structure in a relationship, but there's a lot more freedom. And so kind of, right, like kind of what you were saying, a lot of times in that intimacy level, we talk about passion, purpose, and play. It's really about a couple figuring out who are we, our unique identity as a couple, what helps us thrive. And that's going to be vastly different than any other couple. And so doing that work is really, really important in that stage if that intimacy is going to flourish. And so I think conversations like that are fantastic. Right? Like, what do you need? What do I need? What does our relationship need? Now that we know those things really well, we can answer those questions and keep growing.
I'm curious for you, Monifa, how did it work with the couples?
Oh no, they loved
resonate
it.
with it?
It was, things that I wouldn't even think of to put on a pyramid were coming up. Or like Matthew said, it's under each one or each level of the intimacy pyramid. There's so many varying things under it anyway. And a lot of those varying things were just more important for people that they would want to put on their pyramid rather than how it's phrased in the, the structured intimacy pyramid. So it was actually pretty cool.
That's great.
Especially when you would see a couple when they have, turns out that they were pretty similar when they put their pyramids together, but maybe they just had certain things in different levels, but it was similar. But then you have ones where it's like completely off. And then it's like, okay, still something to work with, but that's information, because then that tells you why we're stuck. You guys have two completely different ideas of what intimacy is for you. So either way, it's beneficial.
They were getting honest, right? That's great. Like
Yeah.
they were getting real and they were giving themselves a chance. And I think I think what we want is people to feel a sense of ownership of their relationship. I think the best thing that Joanna and I learned in our own marriage is that we're the caretakers of it. We're the only two people who can care for the relationship. The relationship can't care for itself. It doesn't exist as this other thing. It's the thing that we take care of together. And I think what you're seeing and naming is people going, this is ours. And ours might be different than someone else's. And that's okay. But we've got to figure out what is ours and what do we do to take care of it, because we're the ones that are going to see it develop over the time. And what are we doing that's taking away from our relationship? So,
well, you guys have mentioned a bit about the book already, but if someone wants to know the ins and outs, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of nuances that go along with this. Just give us more details. Tell us about the book.
Well, it's called Building True Intimacy, Creating a Connection That Stands the Test of Time. And yeah, what we tried to do, we try to make it very readable, approachable. So we actually, and we had conversations about this. We initially were thinking, okay, maybe we talk more generally about things that we've seen, but we're like, no, if we're really going to do this, we have to be vulnerable. So in the whole thing, we have, certain of our own stories that's interspliced throughout as areas that we've learned the good, the bad, the ugly. So there's some of that. So I think you get to see some of what we've been through and how we've applied it in our own relationships, as well as, so there's practical components to it, but that's also, we try to make it like, how do we do this? Relationships people end up in relationships, but they're so tough. They're so tough to do well and over a long period of time, because something nobody ever told me, or if they did, I didn't listen, was who I married, when I got married isn't the same person I'm married to today. We're different people. We grow, we change, and we have to continue to adjust and adjust to the people that we've become. And how do we continue to, build even after we have some difficulties, or after we go through stuff, or, just regular life stuff, or betrayal, or whatever it is. So I think those are the pieces that we really try to lay out in a way that would be, I guess, approachable, but that would be helpful for any couple. I mean, I say this, I had this experience when we were proofreading it, and I don't know how long it took us to write this thing. It took us a while because we were all busy, but when I proofread it, I was like, and finally read through everything, I was like, wow, there's some really good stuff in here. And I was like, oh yeah, I felt like, oh, I need to apply this. I could do this better. And so there's so many things that I was like, okay, that really helped me. And I feel like, again, I think for any of us, that's what we try to do with it, laying out the levels and 3 components in each level, how it works, what it looks like, we define it. We, what we definition of each level is. We have 3 components of each level, how to build those things, and some areas of what it might look like.
I just love the fact that it's it's making something that seems so grand and big more practical and just like digestible. Thank you, Joanna, Matthew, and Dan for stopping by. And if you want to know more about the Intimacy Pyramid, you can find the link to their book and their information in the description below. Thank you for listening in, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And as always, remember to embrace your healing journey. Every step forward brings a new hope for tomorrow. See you next time.